Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Bob Hillman, volleyball coach at University High School in San Francisco, California. Coach, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
Let's dive in. Coach, give us the background. How did you get here? Take us through the journey which led to you being a leader of young people.
I never meant to be one of those things. I was a volleyball player at Stanford from 89 through 93. I played one AVP professional beach volleyball tournament simply to prove that I could make it into one. And then I moved to New York to reinvent myself as a singer and a songwriter and had no interest in being involved in sports ever again, was the thinking at the time. And I did a good job of reinventing myself because my friends in New York did not understand when I said Stanford volleyball. It was meaningless to them. Stanford was meaningless, volleyball was meaningless. It was all meaningless for 20 years, which was actually occasionally annoying because it is a nice sort of source of credibility at times. But in that world, I didn't have that source of credibility. I had to create my own, and it was great. I got into coaching though when my kids were young, and a bunch of other dads convinced me to help them out with the baseball team, saying it would be a co-op effort, but it ended up not being cooperative. And in fact, I
Never
found
is,
that
Bob. It never is.
my kids were young. I didn't know that yet. That's chalk it up to lessons learned. But a few years later, we were still rolling with that preschool era baseball team, and I was down the rabbit hole, and the other dads were not even at the field. And I got really into coaching baseball in the San Francisco Little League, and I'm on the board of Little League even now, and I've coached a bunch of all-star teams. I'm the director of the all-star program. And during that period of 5 or 6 years when my kids were involved in youth baseball in San Francisco, I learned that it wasn't so bad to be involved in sports after all, and that it was really fun to have a kid facing role in sports. I relate pretty well to middle school boys, 10 to 14, for better or worse. And I just started having so much fun hanging out with them. And I also had so much fun learning about baseball. I quit baseball in order to play volleyball after sixth grade, which is a choice you have to make in Southern California. It was an easy choice for me, but learning baseball and developing sort of a detail oriented approach to teaching it was very satisfying. And there was also a community aspect to it, like there is in any little league. And I still see all kinds of kids around town that I coached or engaged with in baseball. And it's just all been so worth it. And I'm only going to stop when I stop relating to those middle school boys. And girls, of course. After a bunch of years coaching baseball, a friend who teaches at University High School in San Francisco, it's an independent school similar to Stevenson without the boarding aspect, he sent me a job description for a volleyball coach. And I thought, this is interesting. I'm really into coaching. I've learned some of those lessons you learn along the way. I've learned to control my emotions. I've learned to think ahead. I've learned to communicate with players and parents. It might be interesting now to coach a sport I actually know something about and have played at a high level. I actually made that joke to myself. Oh, you could coach a sport that you know about for once instead of having to just learn as you go. So I went and met with the athletic director, and there was a funny coincidence. One of our Little League fields is named after that athletic director. His name is Jim Ketchum, and we have a field called Ketchum Field on Treasure Island. And so there was that connection. And so I thought, oh, this is going to happen. But it turned out they had it covered. As an athletic director, sometimes you've got it covered, even when a solid candidate shows up. The strangest thing happened, though. He asked me if I wanted to coach the first season of boys flag football. And I was like, no, absolutely not. That's one thing I can guarantee you I'll never do. And then somehow I found myself on the field coaching flag football like a month later. It was like a hypnosis that occurred, or it was like a series of things that happened. And I ended up coaching a sport I had never coached before, did not want to coach, and had an incredibly fun time. Because it turns out that I could also relate to ninth grade boys because they're very similar to eighth grade boys. It was a crazy season of 25 players. I actually tried to get playing time for everyone, which was super intellectually confusing. And we were 6-0. By the way, I was the JV coach. So I was a high school football coach, but it was flag football and I was JV. We were at the low end. And now I brag about it a lot. I'm always like, oh yeah, I'm 6-0 as a high school football coach. That's like a routine that I have, like a set piece that I'll bring out in like a public speaking situation at the school.
You never go wrong with that one.
It just keeps it's evergreen, and I personally never get tired of it. Anyway, the volleyball job ended up opening up again the next year, and I took it, and we were phenomenally successful in that first year. And I can take like a smidgen of credit, but we had a very strong junior class, and we won. I've actually never lost in league, but we were the NCS Division III runners up, and then we were the NorCal Division II runners up in that very first year. We went to Clovis North to lose, which we actually did again the next year. So now we have a little bit of a thing about going to Clovis North. And I'm entering my third, in the middle. I'm actually running towards the end here of my third season as a volleyball coach. Something that's interesting about it is that I'd never coached volleyball between 1993 and when I started coaching varsity at University High School. I'd never coached volleyball. And now I identify more as a volleyball person than anything. I'm coaching, but I also have a son who plays. My 10th grader plays high school and club volleyball. And so it's typically, I had a day this season where we played a girls' tournament, and then we finished up and I jetted over to the East Bay and watched 2 of his matches, got up the next morning and watched him all day. And had fun the whole time. I wasn't complaining. Sometimes I'll complain just as a matter of course, because that's what you're supposed to do as a club volleyball parent. But the truth is that I was having a lot of fun.
Love that. All right, let's dive into a few of these things that you mentioned. I want to go back to singer-songwriter, and I want to talk about how your background in athletics served you pivoting into that role. And the reason I'm curious is my first year back at Stevenson as a faculty member, one of our seniors who was multi-sport athlete, one of those guys that was like, I'm going to be a collegiate athlete, graduated. Actually, I lied, backpedal. Senior spring, went up on stage and sang in front of everybody for the first time, and then pivoted into music and has been in music for 20 years. And his journey has been one of resilience, obviously, adversity, trying to chase down these things, where he sang, I want to say it was over 400 shows one year just to get reps. So it's always been intriguing to me how those skill sets translate. So I'm curious what your take is and how you've now brought that back to coaching.
No musician has ever said reps. We say gigs. That's the perfect like A.
There you go.
Yeah. I have a good friend, a singer-songwriter named Peter Case, who's a mentor to me. And he once said, you treat music like sports. He literally said that sentence to me. And I think what he meant was I tend to quantify things. Like I'll have my songs for the year that I've written all organized, and I'll know how many songs I wrote, or I'll be tracking everything and trying to learn from the data. I think sports, but also everything that came later. I had a 10-year career doing marketing. All those things feed together. But I think the answer to the question about how sports is in terms of its organization and how I thought about it, sports informed it. And also music's not competitive, but there is a competitive element. How hard are you going to go after? There's actually songwriting contests that you can go to. Like at music festivals, you send a song in and you get selected to participate. And I didn't go in there getting like pumped up and thinking about my game plan or anything, but it was comfortable for me because I competed at a high level and I didn't get stressed out by the idea that we were being judged on something utterly subjective. You can't really keep score in songwriting, but I thought they want to give away prizes. I'm comfortable going 8th and coming in 4th. It's okay. I'm familiar with this situation. You did mention resilience, and I've been rejected in sports. There's teams I didn't make. I hit a ceiling at one point. I was at the low level of national team development, but I'm a 6'1" outside hitter, which means I had a literal and figurative ceiling. A player that couldn't beat me out when he was a freshman and I was a 5th-year senior made the World University Games that year and started in the Olympics 3 years later. It's all good. I understood it, but it was disappointing. I've been rejected a lot. In music, I really experienced rejection. In music, people are really mean to you about it at times too, much more so than in sports, unless you include the Hawaii fans who are like really heckling you hard. In music, it was more people ignoring you or completely not getting what you're doing. So a different kind of resilience is required. But if you've been heckled by the Hawaii or BYU fans, perhaps counterintuitively, you can handle being ignored by a radio station.
So how has that informed your return to coaching, right? Those lessons you learned in being a singer-songwriter, going through that journey. How is that? What did you bring back with you from that? What tools that then you applied to your start in Little League, which has now grown through flag football and volleyball?
Maybe resilience is the word, or maybe like stick-to-itiveness or some coined phrase like that. Let me tap and take it another way, though. Something that's been really important in my coaching career is allowing it to develop organically. I didn't set out to have a career as a coach in the slightest. All I've done is follow where it's led me. A guy sends me a job description. I connect with the AD, who I have a connection to through baseball. We get along. The opportunity's closed. The opportunity's open. I didn't apply to any other volleyball coaching jobs, and I never have. Uh, I've done what's right, what feels right. And I really did that in music too. I had this attitude that I was maybe wise beyond my years in this department. In my mid to late 20s, I figured out that if I just showed up, good things would happen. And so I showed up at festivals, even though I had to pay to go there and participate in these contests, which could be harrowing, and lose the contest pretty regularly and be ignored or be embraced occasionally, those ups and downs. That is exactly how I've pursued my sports career. I tend to say yes to everything. I guess there are exceptions to that. But if someone comes to me enthusiastic about something I can do for them, I get really energetic about it. It was like that in music. Oh, you want to hire me to play at your concert series? That sounds amazing. I'm not begging you, you're asking me. That's when it's the best. And in my coaching career, people are more desperate for coaches than they are for singer-songwriters. And so in my coaching career, the opportunities have arisen pretty regularly so that I feel like if I wanted to roll into something else, it might crop up. I'm not desperate.
No, and that fits. Obviously, the analogy that you bring to it is you're right. There's not a ton of people on the coaching bench that can be successful at doing it. And by successful, meaning you can organize, you can lead, you can have an impact, you can serve, not necessarily your wins and losses, but the things in which we are charged with as leaders of young people. So the other thing I want to tap into that you said about the all-star piece is I want to say, it might have been his Outliers book. It might have been the one he wrote after that. But Malcolm Gladwell talked about how the all-star structure almost privileges kids that are a little bit older, and then it separates them even more from the pack. What have you seen in regards to that aspect of the model and keeping kids engaged and or not in alignment with this rise of the crazy club culture that drives me bonkers? How have you seen that either add value or take away from the athletic experience for kids?
First of all, I believe that Little League All-Stars is the most magical youth sports experience that's available to anyone. I am a serious evangelist for Little League All-Stars, and in District 3 in Northern California, which is San Francisco up through Novato, so it includes Tiburon and Mill Valley. We have a pool play tournament, so you're guaranteed like 5 games, and you get to know these other players and coaches over years. And so it really adds on to the community element that already exists in Little League because you don't bring your own team, you draft teams. And so every year you're playing with your new friends, not your friends that you've always had, your new friends. The phrase we've always used in All-Stars is the race to puberty. 12U is a race to puberty. And so there'll be kids who are 12. Like we always joke about Novato North and Novato South. There's 2 little leagues. There's always some huge guy playing first base. And we're always like, where are we going to get our giant? Why was San Francisco not issued its giant this year? There'll be just a huge kid, or there'll maybe a kid that's just Petaluma a year that they actually got to the regionals, and San Bernardino had a kid that just was. I would say those are fewer and farther between than you would expect, and I haven't experienced that Gladwell analogy as much. I have seen kids that are bigger. I've seen kids that are more developed, but I've seen kids that are smaller holding their own, and they're all in. I guess there's a few months of wiggle room just in terms of how we count the ages, but it's not like 14-year-olds are playing with 12-year-olds.
What about your son's involvement in club versus the education-based experience and how you have seen that evolve over the years? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about your son, but just in regards to you called yourself a club parent earlier, but you're also a high school coach. Talk about that tension arc, let's call it, and how you feel or you have observed that both adding value and taking value away from the athletic experience for
Mhm.
kids.
I have dabbled in club coaching at the Absolute Volleyball Club in San Rafael, across the street from San Quentin, actually. You can make a lot of jokes about choices you can make when you're getting off the freeway. Which direction is it going to be, son? But I helped out with the girls program a little bit, so I'd seen it a little before I got involved with my son Sebastian. But then when he got involved, it was a whole new thing. I don't love being a volleyball parent for the simple reason that I am jealous of those that are involved. I'm not a parent who's stalking the sidelines. I'm not even cheering. I'm not even cheering at all. I'm somewhat mumbling to the person next to me and I'm analyzing quietly and being positive and maybe a little negative at times in a quiet voice. But I struggle with not having any control over the outcome when I have lots of ideas. I am great. You can ask my son's coaches about this. I think they'll corroborate it. I am great at not giving unsolicited input. One time I said one little thing, which was just the weirdest, stupidest little thing, and I apologized profusely after. Uh, I am not. I like to talk to the coaches about volleyball, but I don't talk about my son's playing time or make any qualitative judgments whatsoever. I would say that the school and club experiences are very different in the context of the same sport, and I think a lot of kids would say that school really means a lot to them because they're representing something. And there's a range of skills, but it's these kids they've been with for X number of years, from 1 to 4 years. And it just develops this whole meaning. It's representing the country in the Olympics. It's a very small scale version of that. Club has that too, and you get connected to the guys, but there's a little more mercenary quality to that. People switch clubs year after year, coaches switch. There's a little less consistency in terms of personnel, and people are more concerned with being seen. You don't see this overtly, but inherently, club volleyball is a little more about being seen by college coaches and getting opportunities to shine on the big stage. And that reflects why someone would move to a better team, a team they perceive to be better, or want to be with a certain coach or whatever. And club has meaning. It's really fun for the guys, but I think school has a depth that club can never offer.
Yeah, no, I would agree with most of that in regards to the approach and the feeling of, let's call it inclusiveness, that you're part of something bigger than yourself versus, I think, inherently club and what's the other word, travel type experiences are, while you're part of a team, they're much more about the individual than they are about the team. And I think that's how they're approached. And that's how sometimes the culture piece is very different. What would you say is the best thing you do in your program that you've, I don't know, little league, flag football, volleyball now, that you do that would go with you were you to leave and go somewhere else, that you think has the largest impact or ripple effect on the culture you're trying to build, other than having really good players?
Every coach knows it helps a lot. I don't do anything in particular to drive culture. I don't do the team camping trip. We have occasionally done overnights, but they're always hurried and there's no team bonding. There's a quick dinner and then we're at the hotel and then we're in the tournament the next morning or whatever. Maybe I should do more of that. Talk to them more about goals and individual opportunities. I do talk to the players about those things, but I don't do it. So remember, it's only my third year coaching volleyball, so I'm easing into some of this, and there's not time for everything. And so something that I ponder a lot, and which I'm pondering even now, is what should I be doing to create a culture beyond what I do? I would say what I do now is more associated with philosophical intent and what I prioritize in my program and how I prioritize it. I want my girls to know that there's no right answer. Sometimes they'll look at me and they'll say, should that be my ball? And I will say, I do not know. Possibly, were you standing where we planned to have you stand? Or did you gather some information that led you to stand somewhere else? In baseball, did you go out into right field and stand on a line between the right fielder and the second baseman to take the cutoff? Hey, did you do these things that we're basically trying to do and it didn't go right? Okay, sometimes that happens. Should you have hit the ball to the deep cross court corner or was tipping into the middle of the court the right choice? I have no idea. You make decisions for yourselves, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. What we can provide in our program is a framework for decision making. If we start making specific rules for those things, I think we're in real trouble because then we have to make a rule for everything.
So talk about your framework then. How would you structure that and offer that type of approach to both other volleyball coaches and other coaches in other disciplines?
I think actually don't know. I don't know if it's what's the word I need here? Transferable. It's just the way I talk about it. We'll have a defensive system and we'll have an offensive system, but we'll try to create flexibility in the context of it. I just try to pound it into them when they ask me those questions that there's no right answer ever. There's only the guidelines and how they react in the context of the guidelines.
The answer is always it depends, right? And you can debrief every situation afterwards, but as you're going into it, it's here's what we're trying to do, make the best decision you can.
Ideally, that leads to a culture of empowerment for the athlete, right? They're not at sea because they're given a framework to think about. Okay, on defense, here's where our middle back plays. If you gather new information, like you see the set traveling close to the net, which suggests that its hit might be coming, maybe you take 2 steps up. At the very least, though, you need to be still when the ball is hit. So once you've made a decision about where you're going to stand, be still when the ball's hit, read and react. If you've done those things, you had a successful rep, whether you played the ball or didn't play the ball.
How would you describe and or evaluate, let's call it, or reflect upon how that type of approach has been received? I'm sure it's been received positively, but it had to be bumpy along the way because that's probably not what the kids were used to.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how I'm doing. It's harder with younger kids to allow any kind of, here's a musical metaphor, improvisation within the structure. What jazz is a chord structure and then a bunch of improvisation. 10-year-olds are not as good at it as 17-year-olds, but 17-year-olds, you're right, have been told by certain club coaches who are more precise that this is how you do something. Here's what an arm swing should look like. Here's how you should hold your hands. Sometimes, I'm not above saying there is a right way to do things. For example, when you're taking a cutoff, you have to turn and then catch, as opposed to catching and then turning, because you need to save that 1/10 of a second. I believe that's objectively right. There's other areas where they may have been taught something else by another coach, and I try to be really flexible about that. I want them to tell me because, first of all, I don't want to confuse them. And second of all, if there's a better way, I want to know about it. But it takes a long time, and back to this phrase of reps, like we need empowerment reps in our program. And I can tell them 100 times there's no right answer, but the 101st time they might still be looking for one. And I understand that. It's nice to know, what they should have done. And I constantly disappoint them by saying, I'm just not sure. And it's not because I'm not smart about it. It's not because I don't have a point of view. It's because you see, it's so tempting as a coach to say, I know everything. If only you had used this footwork, you would have had it. You'll see coaches on a volleyball sideline holding up after an unsuccessful block. You'll see them holding up their arms in the manner that they would have wanted the player to hold up their arms. But I'm pretty confident that not only would that not have worked, but it's not helping in the moment. I want to empower my players to, if they have a plan in most situations, they know what we're trying to accomplish and basically how, then they can react. And if it takes 100 to 200 times of me telling them that, it's worth it, if only because I'm planting a seed, like a life lesson type seed for what actually is going to come from that, like in their first job, when they're building a financial model, when they're doing all these different things. Maybe they can think about this concept of structure and how you react improvisationally in its context.
Yeah, for sure. And all of that is great. And I want to steal and plagiarize that, and I plan to. Let me pivot to got your start in Little League, did flag football, volleyball. The kids play different things. What would you say you've learned watching other disciplines that you've been able to take from, borrow, implement your own approach to coaching volleyball?
Like any good coach, I steal from other programs. And so watching my son's club volleyball practices, by the way, speaking of empowerment, I want to empower sports parents to own the fact that the most fun thing you can do as a parent is watch your kids play sports. There's something so fun about it. I'm not even going to try to explain it. So I will watch a full practice, in part because we've driven an hour and I have nothing else to do, but in part because I like to sit there with the other dads and moms and just be like, whatever, what just happened? That was funny. Or what'd you do yesterday? That community part appeals to me. But I'll take a drill from a volleyball practice that happens on Sunday, and I will use it in my practice on Monday because I am always looking for new fun things. It's so easy to get calcified in your approach, especially at the end of a season when your priorities are clear. You've been emphasizing them like crazy since the beginning, and you're stuck in here's how we work through those priorities. Throw in something new and surprise them that you learned the previous day, and that's the recipe for a practice that's more fun than the two you've had before. So I steal ruthlessly. When I watch the warm-ups of other teams, I sometimes think, should I be warming up like that? Or when I watch how another coach plays, I think, should my team be playing like that? Here's an example. The Mill Valley Little League all-star coach in one of my age groups would line up cones down the sideline, and every kid would have a cone, and his glove would be next to the cone. And they just had a really regimented approach. And when I see a regimented approach, which is not my natural habitat, I think, oh my God, I should have a more regimented approach. Every time, that's what I think. Because I do like precision, actually. I'm like not totally capable of achieving it, but I like it. But after a minute, I think, you know what? I'm more of a pile up your gloves, or even form a super meaningful creative sculpture out of your gloves type of guy. You have to be who you are as a coach. Otherwise, it's not authentic. If you're a coach who, listen, no one approves of coaches who yells at their players. But if that's the coach you are, that's the coach you should be until you get fired from coaching for yelling at your players. If you're a coach like me who tries to disarm with humor, that's the coach you have to be. And I get in trouble with that sometimes, plenty of times. Sometimes people can't tell if I'm joking. I get in trouble. They feel offended or something. But I'm really trying to be my authentic self, and that is not that kind of warm up. And so I actually learn from other coaches how to be more myself. When I just see that they do something that's different from me, and I think, should I be doing that? And after 5 minutes, I realize, no, I should probably be doing the best possible version of the thing I do.
How has having your children go through their own experience informed your approach to coaching, specifically when one of your kids is away at boarding school and you pretty much get their narrative and you're not there all the time, right? And the other one you get to watch all the time. It's like, how do you process that and then apply to your own experience as a coach?
Yeah, I do pop down to Stevenson for games pretty regularly. So I'm no stranger to the gym or to the baseball field down there. I do. For the boarding school kid, there's a little more of a one-sided aspect to it. I hear, but I don't observe quite as much. But I do observe enough to form an opinion about what my son should be doing in terms of, hey, you're playing. I love the way you're playing, but also if you're not getting the playing time that you want, hey, it might make sense to talk to your coach. If you're not seeing your kid at all, you can't recommend that necessarily. But if you're seeing him a little, maybe you can. With my San Francisco kid, it's really quite seamless. Actually, during high school volleyball, I don't see him play much because I'm doing my thing while he's doing his thing. In fact, we played each other last year. We started a boys team at university, and we played my son's team. And I had a whole plan to target him. I was going to serve him every ball. But then he's like a pretty good passer. And so I had to abandon that strategy. It was like super disappointing because I wanted to break him down. I thought I had a psychological advantage as the parent. And we ended up losing to them in 4. And so now he has a psychological advantage, like super discouraging, you know? But I do see it all. And I know his coach because his coach coaches girls too. So I coach against his coach during the fall. And then I'm like his coach's like parent during the spring. And so I'm like really, even though I don't see a lot of it, I know everything that's going on at all times. I know how the coach coaches. I know what kind of personality he is. With Sebastian's volleyball coach in high school, I really know what's going on. With Soren's JV basketball coach, I have to be told. And so it's what I'm going to advise my kids to do if they need my advice is inherently different. And it's much more challenging with the one where I can't observe the coach day to day.
How have you taken the feedback loops you get from both kids, regardless of your ability to observe, and utilize those to grow yourself as a coach and how you approach other kids?
I and other parents very regularly regularly encourage our kids to talk to their coaches, but no players ever ask me for an individual meeting. You know what I mean? They don't want to.
100%.
Yeah, they don't want to talk to me. And I truly believe it's not because I'm too scary. Maybe I'm intimidating. I am an authority figure, but I try to make it clear that I'm open to those kinds of conversations. Once in a while, someone takes advantage of it, but so often they don't. And so when I give that advice to my kids, I know it's the last advice in the world they're looking for. They do not want to do that. But I'm not going to do it. There's nothing lamer than a parent reaching out to a coach to talk about their son's situation. I would say that's the main area. That's the main like feedback loop. It's a dissonant situation there where I've been able to inform. I don't sit there wondering, God, why aren't these girls talking to me? I feel I'm so open. It's because they don't want to talk to the adult.
No doubt. No, and I think it's interesting, right? As your kids grow up, I've had 3 go through. My last one's a freshman, the other 2 are in college, and watching them go through certain things and then having a similar experience where part of it is just them needing to vent. And I'm like, hey, your coach lives like 100 yards away. Go talk to them. It's no, I don't want to. It's cool. And stop complaining to me about it because
Yeah.
like I don't care. And so it's like, how do you then take that when we perceive there might be a necessity to talk to that kid, and we generally, our default is just wait for them to come? At what point do we know and reach out and try to be a little bit proactive?
Yeah, so often we just don't know, and that's on us to an extent. But it's hard to read teenagers. My 10th grader, I can't tell. I can tell what he's thinking, but coaches always say, "Wow, Sebastian feels that way." I never would have known from his complete poker face. My older son's a little more expressive, but so many players act one way but feel another, and I don't blame them for it. I just wish that I could figure out a way to be approachable and not frustrated when they approach me. Occasionally, it's tempting to be frustrated. That's a hard thing to control as a coach because maybe you've told them something 10 times and they're asking you the same question for the question's coming up in the meeting for the 11th time. But in general, I find that I'm actually more relatable to the 11-year-old baseball players. So it may be that like high school, when I first started coaching, the decision to coach girls volleyball was not difficult, but there were 2 things I was worried about. One was, how do I catch up on volleyball? They'd completely changed the rules since I played. There was a new position, the libero. A serve that touched the net no longer was a fault, et cetera, et cetera. What are the trends? What are the trends? Like, how are we doing things? I didn't know any of that. I'd never taught serve receive, even though I'd been a primary serve receiver for a almost national championship team. I worried about that, but I don't worry about it that much. I figured I could catch up. But I was very freaked out about the high school girl situation because I have 2 sons. And so I did not know. Both of them went to all boys schools for middle school. And so I just did not know what high school girls were thinking. And it turned out to be cool, but it hasn't always been.
It's a different experience. I can tell you that, having done both.
Yeah.
What would you say you have most recently changed your mind on, either athletically, coaching, musically, at home, whatever, as you navigate the world, right? How's your growth mindset operation going? And what are some things that you specifically have made a point after research or study or whatever to be like, you know what? I don't believe that anymore. I'm over here now.
Yeah. There's one actually really practical one. At a certain point, I couldn't conceive of taking freshmen on my varsity volleyball team, but I got over it. I had a couple years ago, I had 12 seniors. We're not going to have spots for freshmen, but a club coach in the area who's actually a rival high school coach of mine and a friend championed 2 freshmen. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't see how we. And then a few days later, I was like, we have to have these girls on our team. They're fantastic players and kids. So I just was like, oh, I was completely wrong about that. Never again. And I'm always happy to consider freshmen from now on. But overall, more philosophically, like the experience I've had as a coach is that every year I think back to 1, 2, 3 years previously and realize how bad of a coach I was those years. That's not literally true necessarily, but you think to yourself, I think any self-aware coach will hopefully think, wow, what was I doing at the beginning there? That really makes no sense. And I just try to tune it up. And so this year I had a very new group. I had my great junior class had graduated. And I have as my outside hitters on a volleyball team, the position that touches the ball the most, I have a freshman and a sophomore. I had 2 players I converted a setter into a libero because I had 3 great liberos, all of whom graduated. And I converted a setter. So I had to teach serve receive at a much different level than I ever had before. And so where I've gotten a lot better is becoming a detail-oriented teacher of different skills. This year it was passing. Next year I'll probably have to. Our great setter is going to graduate, and so I'm going to have to start thinking more about being a great setter coach. I have a continuous improvement model that I've implemented for myself, and I learned that early on in baseball. I got burned one year when we moved up to AAA in Little League, and coaches were running on me. They do the thing where the pitcher's not watching and the runner just runs to second. I hadn't experienced that before, and I got burned on it, but I only got burned on it that once. After that, I was teaching it, and other coaches were getting mad at me for running on them. Like completely flipped. I'm willing to reconsider anything at any time. Like I'm watching other coaches. I have a great volleyball network, and I'm talking sometimes to some of the top coaches in college or the world or international volleyball. I'm able to pick their brains, and from everyone from them to like the 13U club assistant who has a drill that's fun. I'm open to what you've got to offer.
So on that, what's the best thing you got from one of those globally renowned coaches, and what's the best thing you got from somebody that the majority of the volleyball world won't know who they are?
Yeah, Matt Fearbringer was an assistant on the men's Olympic team this year, and he was a Stanford player. The beginning of his career was the end of mine. And when I was getting back into coaching, I called him up to chat about volleyball, and he told me a few practical things, but one of them, this is highly practical, was an out-of-system set should be high inside and on the net, not outside of the pin. And the reason for that is that you have increase your chances of being able to play the ball onto the other side of the court. And if you watch the French national team, there's a player named Irvin Ingapeth who's the master of that, who gets these quick out-of-system balls right onto the net, and he shoves the ball into the block, that kind of stuff. So that's probably a lesson. I mean, he's a club director, a high school club director too. I know that the clubs teach that as well, but I just had never heard of that. That's not what we did. We set super high balls off the net, out of system back in my day. From the younger coaches, I get simplicity, patience, and creativity. I don't watch that many young kid practices, but when my son's 16s team is playing, sometimes there'll be a 13s, maybe a 13-3s team playing on the next court. And I won't see standing around, but I'll see a very simple type of rep that those coaches are delivering for those kids. I'll see them teaching by example sometimes and explaining and re-explaining. And I remember sometimes there is no substitute for simplicity. We don't want anyone standing around. Yeah, we want it to be fun for them. Maybe we can figure out a scoring system. Maybe we can have multiple things happening at once. But sometimes it's okay, especially with younger kids, it's okay to slow it down and do one thing.
A buddy of mine says simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So there's your piece on that. Give me this take, and then we're going to wrap up. Because my coaches have said things about playing in and out of system before, and I don't fully understand what it is. Because often I'll just be like, just hit the thing over the net, right? So what is the value / approach to being in system versus not? And when is it okay to break out of that in order to just survive, so to speak?
It's not really a choice. You're in system when you have a good pass and you have all of your attacking options available to you. You're out of system when it's a bad pass or a dig, and maybe the setter's setting it from the back line, or maybe the libero's setting it, or maybe it's just being popped up into the air. And it's more, we can't dictate the terms of this engagement. We're just going to try to stay alive here and be as competitive as we can and make the other team play, make it as difficult on the other team as we can, knowing that we're not going to be faking them out.
Got it. That's super helpful. That makes sense. Yeah, because often we'll sit and watch, and there are teams in our league where I'm utterly convinced that their entire strategy is just keep the ball in play and make you mess up.
That's a style of volleyball. And if you were a middle school volleyball coach, which I was for one of my sons briefly, my strategy was, if we can make our serve in more than the other team, we are going to win. It's not even the serving and passing game. It's just the serving game. You put your best servers first and your worst servers last, and you see what you can do about that. But even at the high school, we're at a decent level. My school's at a decent level, so is yours. At our levels, you can't just keep the ball in play. You have to put pressure on your opponent, right? It's just like a slightly elevated version of just make your serve, but we don't want to bump it over if we can avoid it. we want to get some kind of swing on the ball, even if it's like a desperate sort of standing swing with some topspin to the deep part of the court. We're going to increase our chances of forcing them to make a mistake if we keep the ball in play. We do not want to just hand it over.
No, that makes perfect sense. All right, last question. What is the best tool you have recently adopted, either in your personal space or in your coaching life? I got things that I offer to people as the athletic director, but I'm always curious what I can steal from people. So what's the best tool you have recently adopted?
When you say, can you define tool?
Sure, like the way in which we scheduled this, Calendly, or the way in which I use software that records conversations and transcribes them.
Yeah. In volleyball, we use Huddle, and Huddle Assist is an incredible tool because you can. Just now, I was scouting a potential opponent in our league finals, and I wanted to see what they were doing in rotation one, and so I click rotation one, and I watch every rotation one from the last match we played against them. My son's volleyball club, Bay to Bay, uses like a elevated version of Huddle called Volumetrics. And I have not found that to be better than Huddle yet, but I'm not an admin, so there may be something I'm missing in Volumetrics. And there's a few other ones that do that, but if you can get your video cut up for you, listen, I'm not making like a VHS compilation of rotation ones. So I find that to be a useful tool. I definitely use just like YouTube videos and stuff, but there's various elite volleyball players, and I'm 100% sure this is true in every sport, who are offering like online academies. And when I decided to get my passing teaching together, I subscribed for a couple of months to a thing called the Libero Academy. And a libero named Dustin Watton, who's very known in the volleyball community, offers that. And it's a really nice value for players and coaches who are trying to level up their game. I don't know how to sift through those, but I think that finding something online and investing a little bit for a month or two in something like that can be so valuable to coaches and players.
I'm just going to pinpoint what you said about Huddle because I don't necessarily think that everyone uses it in the same way, right? So like our football coaches definitely get to scout film because it's mandated film exchange, plan for the games, right? We use it in basketball. I know our games are in our volleyball account, and it's one of those things where I didn't even think about taking the other teams and putting that in there. So that's a great tool to offer.
The other teams are already in there, right? And sometimes they're not. And so you can only get what you're doing, but you can also see what they're doing. And it's possible to scout your opponents. There's NFHS, for club volleyball, there's Baller TV. People put stuff up on YouTube, but the Huddle is pretty powerful. Huddle is pretty powerful. And if you're, I don't even do video sessions with my players very often. That's an opportunity area for me. I need to show them what some of the other teams are doing. I'm gonna have to do one this week probably, but without Huddle, I don't see how I'm doing that video session that I aspire to do.
No, it's not the days when we were in college where I had the stack of videotapes and I had the 2 VCRs making clips. Thank God those days are over.
Yeah, I have a video coordinator.
Yeah. So anyway, you got to get him to the bus. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you next time you're in town.
I appreciate it. I'll see you down in the Monterey Peninsula.